Welcome back to the Broker Breakdown with your hosts, James and Mike. It's been a while, but we are finally back. Summer was kind of all over the place with things going on in our personal lives, work lives, all that kind of stuff. But we are back recording for October 4th, I believe, Mike. Yes, October 4th is when this will be coming out. So how's your summer been?
It's been busy. A lot of stuff going on in the insurance industry always, right? People picking up vehicles, buying homes. There is no lack of opportunities, I'd say, during the summer months.
Oh yeah, and then you having to have that own personal time, enjoy a little bit of time away from work, and summer always seems like you're kind of like trying to balance your work and home life a little bit more because you want to be outside, like being with family and stuff, and then obviously you got to do your work duties as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, summer, everyone kind of looks forward to it, I think, right? So not only is work always typically busy for us in the insurance business, but you kind of balance your own holidays and just whatever other hobbies you do, or going out with friends and family and patios, or whatever everyone likes to do, right? So
Yeah,
it is certainly a busy time.
I know me and you are big into golf, so I know that was like a big thing for me this summer. Was I golfed more this summer than I've ever golfed in my life, so it was nice to kind of get out there and you know create some more connections that I had. We actually did I think 2 weeks ago now. I actually did with a few buddies of mine. We kind of did like a nice little like tournament kind of thing up in Muskoka, just kind of branded under my name and stuff, which was kind of cool. But wanted to kind
Yeah.
of build off that next year, so hopefully we can kind of get a bigger kind of group out and kind of go from there. But yeah, I feel like the summers you're just really balancing the work and personal life a lot more because in the winter you're really doing nothing. Like for me, like I don't do
Yeah.
anything in the winter, so it's all work for me in the winter. And I can't really golf unless I go to a simulator. So
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I mean, I enjoy fall. I do not enjoy winter, aside from the
no,
actual holidays and what stuff. The actual cold weather I find is
not a winter
miserable.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
not a winter guy.
I know a few people that love, going skiing and snowboarding
I
and,
never
and kind
got
of,
into it. I never got into
yeah.
any of those winter sports. Maybe other than hockey, but like again, like hockey, like you're indoors unless you're playing pond hockey, which I don't mind doing that. But other than that, like there's really nothing that like if I could like move away to like a really warm tropical area for like the winter and like play golf or like do whatever in the warmth of not and no snow, no ice, I would do it
Oh, yeah.
110%.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful. It's beauty. So I think that's the time too. Like you said, most people actually typically insurance as an industry slows down, right? Getting into kind of December, January, February, then starts picking back up again. But
Yeah, there's a
it's,
lot of factors for that. Like I think a lot of
yeah,
it's holiday based, depending on like what holiday you celebrate. But I think a lot of it's financial too, because a lot of the holidays that we celebrate, depending on what you celebrate, comes with like for Christmas, for example, everyone buys presents and stuff, right? So then coming into January and February, a lot of people have kind of strained their financials, so they're not really doing a lot financially in those months. So I feel like that kind of slows a lot of stuff down. But yeah, I think those are the two biggest factors is basically like the holiday, whatever you celebrate, and then financially, like just people aren't doing things during that time.
yeah. Well, I mean, if there's other people like us out in the world, if you don't like going out, you have no interest in going to look at new vehicles, or buying a home in the dead of winter. Like there's all of these things that
Yeah, moving in the
you
winter,
know
no one ever likes to do anyways. You always say like the moving real estate people love like springtime and summertime because that's when everyone moves. No one moves in the winter because it's not fun. You don't want to move
no,
in the cold, right?
no, it's terrible. It's terrible.
But yeah, kind of moving on from that. Some big news, I guess, at least in North America, anyways. This hurricane that kind of touched down late last week and early this week, and then kind of us moving into that hurricane season. But a lot of people in Canada, we don't really get very extreme after effects from those hurricanes. But I think this one, Hurricane Fiona, is definitely got to be up there for aftermaths for hurricanes, wouldn't you think?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Like anything that I've already seen, numbers wise. I mean, when you think about it, typically if a hurricane runs up the East Coast, it's losing strength as it moves up the coast. It's not gaining strength the way that it did, right? So like our maritimes there typically don't see things like that, and if they do, they're vastly less in terms of strength, right, for storms. So,
Yes.
and I know some initial initial numbers and whatnot. We're putting this easily by far as the largest, right, kind of natural event catastrophe in Canadian history for sure.
Yeah, because I sent you the article on LinkedIn there, and they were already saying that they were estimating that this was going to cost about $700 million just in Atlantic Canada alone. So, and then us looking back too, if you we kind of touched base on this a little bit in episode 3 about climate change and stuff, but we did touch base about how um, some of the biggest payouts in Canadian insurance history have come a lot from the West Coast, like wildfires, like the Fort McMurray. Like that was about $500 million a few years ago, but already they're basically estimating this is going to be up towards of $700 million. And again, like those are very, very rough estimates. Like even when they did the Barrie tornadoes, the Barrie tornadoes turned to be what, 200 million?
I don't know. I didn't see any numbers on that.
I believe, yes. I believe it was 200 million that they estimated at. I'm just kind of quickly looking. Sorry, 100 million. 100 million is what they're estimating that's going to be paid out for insurance wise. So you got to think like 100 million from like just a small little area in Barrie to a huge area of basically they're saying all Atlantic Canada is going to cost 700 million. So that's a big hit to a lot of insurance companies, right? And people that are going to be impacted by the storm going forward.
Well, and you know what? The one thing too, I know we've spoken about this before, and we did actually, I think, even a brief episode on it, was part of the water damage in general. So what insurance companies typically will cover. And I guess I say that from, again, being more of an Ontario broker, right? So not coastal, but just kind of Great Lakes and regular weather. But different types of water damage, right? Of what is covered, what's not. And I think that's going to be a massive talking point in our industry, especially with coastal stuff usually not being covered, right? There's only a very handful of insurers that typically provide, if they even do, coastal kind of wave insurance, or whatever the term is for that.
Yeah, you even see it in Ontario where like a lot of insurance companies won't do they won't do water coverage if you're like on like a lake or like anything like that too, right? Or at least they limit the amounts that you're allowed to have. I think for this hurricane though, I think what it's going to come down to is I think it's going to be basically chalked up as catastrophic event. So I think regardless of what the damages are, I think the insurance companies will come through, because usually when it's catastrophic, it doesn't matter. The insurance companies are paying out. But again, that will be a very long-term process of deciding how that kind of goes and how that plays out with the insurance companies. Because again, insurance companies do not want the bad media, because if they don't pay out something based off this, that's going to just be even worse than paying it out. So I think regardless, I think it's going to be chalked up as catastrophic. And regardless, I think anything is going to get paid out, because again, they're saying that this has probably been like if not the worst, one of the worst aftermaths of like a hurricane that we've ever seen in Canadian history. And it will chalk up at their easily in the top 3 for biggest like insurance claims we've ever seen in Canada. Probably just ahead of Fort McMurray, because the Fort McMurray really was like the kind of base point for like the biggest damages we've ever seen from a wildfire. So I think this will probably just go up ahead of that based on the early numbers that we're seeing.
Right. Yeah. I guess time will tell, right? These types of claims of this magnitude take a long time.
Take forever, because it's not just one person that's impacted. It's hundreds of thousands. Like they were saying even yesterday that there was still like 300,000 people that still don't have power or electricity or anything down there. So this will be this will be years before they finally like figure all this out, because it's going to take so long to like go through all these clients, and not even just from the perspective like a single company, because it's not like one company insures everyone in Atlantic Canada. That's the nice thing about insurance, is that you kind of can spread the risk a little bit more. So it's not one company taking on the massive hit. Obviously, the bigger companies are going to take bigger hits because they obviously are probably going to have more clients. But for all the companies to basically make sure that all this stuff gets figured out and paid out is going to take a lot of time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time. Especially because that trickled on effect about, as claims continue to come in and the damage numbers increase, restoration costs. I mean, this stuff will take months before it's even remotely close to knowing the exact numbers for them. But
exactly,
then it's the next process afterwards that happens in our industry, which is how do they recoup those large losses, and then how does the average policyholder see an increase? Right, every insurance company will have its own rate increases probably in order to compensate, but it also depends on how heavily they were hit, right? Different insurers.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit later, because I want to kind of get into some more preventable ways that you can go around kind of making sure that you're prepared. I know no one's really prepared for these things to happen, because no one really thinks that, oh, I live in Canada and we're going to get hit by this massive like hurricane. Like, we don't really see that kind of weather in Canada. But again, there are some preventative things you can do to make sure that you, one, have the right coverage, and two, that you're making sure that not only yourself, but maybe like if you have a family, that your family's ready for these kind of things, right? Because we've seen, especially with climate change, which climate change was our topic for episode 3, that these things are happening more and more often, and people need to be more and more aware and prepared when these things are actually happening. That's what I want to get into first before we kind of go into what the trickle-down effect is going to be from this hurricane. So what do you think the biggest thing you would say to your client to kind of say, you know what, like, let's prepare for the worst to happen in this circumstance?
Yeah, it's tough for people that live, I think, right on the East Coast, because I don't know what you can do financially to prepare for kind of whatever storm surges you get that way, right? I mean, the average stuff that consumers always can and should do, and the one thing that most insurance companies provide discounts for is, the sump pumps, having maybe a backup on that sump pump, so that if the power does go out, you're not left without any type of preventative measure. The big thing we see in more urban centers, right, is backflow prevention valves.
Yep.
In those main
sewer
lines.
Yeah, which most cities now, if you're doing any sort of like plumbing updates, they usually have them. Like, you have to they're installed up to code now. Like, you have to have them.
Yeah, I think municipally everyone's a little bit different, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find that you don't even have to install them now on new builds across. Yeah. I mean, there might be maybe one of these times we should get actually a builder on here and
ask that question. Yeah,
but
a good idea.
I know a lot of people that when you're talking to that have new build homes, if you ask, is there any preventative measures in the basement, blah, 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 there is conversation. Well, yeah, I was told by so-and-so that I have, this backflow prevention valve in it. Boom, perfect. Right. So those are the big things, I think, for water. But the other big thing that I would want to point out, because we see this far too often, is ensuring you don't have your eaves troughs and downspouts going directly into the weeping tile beside your house, right? Because all of that rainwater needs to get pushed away from your property as far as you can get it. And I'm not saying go out and dig your own massive kind
pond
of lines there, or do whatever you want to do. I get everyone financially has to do their own thing, but just having those downspouts even extended out 6-8 feet away from your property or wherever you think, do not put them into that storm drain system, because that's literally where backups come from.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is what I would recommend to people is don't underestimate what the power of like weather can do, because I find way too often is people are like, I don't live near a lake, I don't live near this. This has never happened in 100 years, so I don't need water coverage. I live on a hill, I live on gravel, I live on sand, whatever excuse it might be. And they're like, you know what? I don't need water coverage. I'm gonna be fine. But it's like you never know. Like you never know when these things are going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I've certainly had many conversations where, depending on where your home is, elevation wise, you'll get those sand comments. I hear about that quite regularly. And the one thing I would say is, we're here to educate. I'm certainly not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. But if you've lived in a home for, some people you talk to, it's like 30, 40, 50 years and never had water damage in your basement.
It's a tough go. It's definitely a
saying,
tough go.
Yeah, telling them or saying you should put this on because you might have it happen and you're going to pay this X amount of dollars. That's a tough sale because in their mind, they're taking a risk based on, not seeing anything.
I don't even think it's a tough sale. I think it's a tough educational point because you're trying to educate them on what you're seeing in the market, but then you have to go against their 30, 40, 50 years of I've never had a water claim before, right? So it's tough. Like it's a tough point to try to prove to someone that, you know what? Accidents are accidents for a reason. Disasters are disasters for a reason. When these things, we can't always predict that these things are going to happen, because with hurricanes, like anything, like they could easily just turn and like it could just miss us. It could turn in this massive like thing that we did not predict for, right? But then the problem is that if you don't think it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, insurance is obviously there to help pay for it, right? We've discussed this before, especially if you have coverage for that. But at the end of the day, ultimately, preventative measures are the answer, as much as you're willing to or can do. Because if you have and obviously the people that have had claims will kind of speak up and understand the importance of this. But if you've had a massive water claim in your basement, for example, or heaven forbid, a fire loss, that experience to get back to where you were prior to that loss happening is a long time, right? Your life is completely uprooted for that entire length of time.
Oh yeah, especially if it's a massive claim where you're basically like you have to move out, like you can't actually live at the home, all that kind of stuff. It's tough. Like don't get me wrong, and that's why insurance is there to prevent those things from happening, right? Like we don't want to put anyone on the road.
Yeah, I mean, insurance is going to help pay for it in the event that it does. But ultimately, if you were to ask someone after that happens, what would you rather have?
I think more people would say that they are willing to do more preventative things after a claim. But the problem is I feel like the society that we live in, a lot of people are very reactive to things. That's the issue, is that they rather react to something happening instead of being proactive. You don't see a lot of proactive people being like, you know what? I see that there's a crack in my foundation. I'm going to fix that the day that I see it. It's usually pushed off until something actually happens. Like we do it. Yeah. I do it all the time. Yeah. You probably do it all the time. Like how many times have you been like, oh, I should probably like fill my tire on my car because it's a little bit low, and then you kind of just let it go, and then it goes low, and then you finally go, you know what, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, you're right. Those types of, whether they're minuscule or major, I think you're right. You make a point, just addressing things when they need to be addressed and not prolonging them right forever.
Yeah, because prolonging them can just cause like for this instance, imagine prolonging like, let's say, a foundational issue on your home, and then a Hurricane Fiona comes in and wipes away like your whole home, and then like, or not even just do that, but like, let's say it hits your home, and with a more solid foundation, it would have caused less damage, but because the foundation was already compromised as it was, it caused more damage than it actually should have.
Yeah, it's tough. This is going to be. I mean, we'll see more follow. It's tough to hurricanes. I mean, are something that we've historically never seen.
We don't see them, so it's very hard to say, oh, this is how you prevent it. Like, there's no way of preventing something like that. Is there a way of kind of stopping massive damage and maybe preventing damage a tiny bit, yes. But again, especially in Canada, like we don't see a lot of this types of weather patterns very often.
Yeah, well, it depends where you were as well. There are obviously certain areas got hit much worse than others.
Yeah, because usually what we'll see is like the storm will come up and then it will be like heavy rain or something. Especially in Ontario, we'll see heavy rain, like windstorm, that kind of stuff. Like East Coast obviously is a little bit different because they're coastal. They'll probably see a little bit heavier, but we don't see like down in Florida, like where they're like smoked by the eye of the storm, like Category 4. Like we don't see that up here, like ever.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's true. That's very true. It's very true.
So, kind of going from there, how do you see this trickling down then? Like over months, over the next few years, like what do you see happening? Like do you see insurance companies, like I find personally, I find these kind of events, even though they are catastrophic, I do feel like they are like educational times in our industry, because then we can kind of look at it and be like, you know what, like we should probably have a coverage for this. I think COVID was a big thing too, because COVID kind of woke a lot of companies up and said, you know what, we should probably have pandemic coverage, because when this pandemic hit, or when it hit 2 years ago, no one had anything. No one had coverage for pandemic losses at all. And then you
Right.
saw a lot of companies kind of in the last 2 years create a pandemic wording in their policies to either cover it or to exclude it. So do you think that's kind of what we're going to see? Like, what do you kind of see the market kind of moving towards?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this kind of stuff is inevitable. Like cyber, earthquake. There's lots of different things that have been
Cyber is another
available,
big one.
and or just in general, as risk exposures become larger, insurance companies determine, how are they going to price this, that type of stuff. But it does take time, right? That doesn't happen in 1 year, because you have to have enough data where it makes sense. I mean, coastal wave type insurance coverages for I mean, similar type of events. I don't know. I mean, you can maybe say that some companies will add it into their wordings. Some might say, it might be looked at similar to that of like earthquake, which I know a lot of carriers have. Probably very, very few clients, including myself, have on their own, because our exposure is so little that we just never thought about it. But I mean, when you think about that, as an example, you can purchase that coverage in your policy. You typically have a higher deductible. It's usually a percentage deductible.
Yeah, usually 3 to 5% of the value of the home.
Right. So it's already a
Of the
massive
claim. Sorry,
massive deductible by itself. And you also are paying usually quite a bit more for what the exposure is to yourself, right? So if people say, I'm not willing to spend $500 extra a year for the 1 of a million chance of an earthquake here in Canada, right? Which maybe some people would argue, then yeah, we just don't buy it as general consumers. So I don't know if coastal stuff, if hurricanes kind of go into that, or if we as an industry take a different approach and people start saying, okay, I've went through this. It was terrible. I am willing to pay, any amount required in order to prevent, myself having to pay for that moving forward, right? I guess we don't know.
Yeah, I did a topic on this last year about earthquakes. I did a big study on it, and I kind of went on to like a lot of like the Canadian government websites and stuff, and I was looking in Ontario, at least since 1975, we've only had 3 earthquakes over a 5 magnitude. The highest one was a 7.4, and it was in the middle Lake Ontario. So it's very taking those stats and kind of trying to show the public that you should have earthquake coverage is a very, very hard educational point, because the facts don't lie. We don't have that many earthquakes in Ontario. Even in Canada, if you look at Canada, why we don't really have that many earthquakes? Like we're just not on the um the plates on the earth that make us have that kind of event. So to kind of tell a client, you know what, like you should have this, is it's a very hard educational point because the facts just are there that we just don't historically have that kind of event ever happen in Canada. And I'll never forget, I actually kind of did this whole study is because I had a client that wanted earthquake, like fought me to the day that we like signed the policies that they wanted earthquake coverage. And I kept saying to them, I'm like, I even sent them the whole like study that I like looked up and stuff. And I was like, listen, like, here's the facts. Like, if you want it, great. But I just don't think it's a risk that you really need to worry about because if it's a catastrophic earthquake to the point where like everyone is being affected by this, then the insurance company will pay out based off catastrophic. But again, that's a positive outcome because you already have a client that is already saying, you know what? I don't want this to happen to my risks and my properties. Please give me it, regardless of how low the percentage of this happening is going to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially with coverages like that, where depending on, I guess it all comes back to whatever your risk exposure is, right? What are you willing to accept versus not accept?
Exactly. Do we see in the market, like it's got to be inevitable, right? Like we got to think that Atlantic provinces are going to obviously see. I don't want to use the word massive, but I sort of have to. Are we going to see massive changes to premiums because of this in Atlantic Canada?
I mean, yeah, somewhere down the line, right? Who knows?
Like not immediately, but like you got to think 3 to 5 years. Like insurance companies must be taking massive increases in those areas because they can't recoup $700 million in 1 year.
Not even no. No, and obviously, I don't know the numbers on that too to say what is, but I mean, if you're thinking that, if you're saying like those are the numbers that they're going to be paying out, give or take,
yeah, those are just the rough numbers from the article that was on LinkedIn.
Right,
they're saying
right.
that it's going to hit upwards of 700 million. So obviously, insurance companies aren't going to slap you with a 3,000% increase in 1 year, but they're going to gradually increase it. Like it's got to be inevitable. Like there's no way that this massive thing happens and they're not going to take increases because already Atlantic Canada obviously pays lower insurance than most provinces, especially Ontario. But
yeah. But again, they'll just spread it out though too, right? Like I mean, all the insurance companies that sell insurance out there through, I guess, the broker channel as well. I mean, they're right across Canada, I would assume, for the most part.
Yeah, most of them are. Atlantic Canada basically has all the same as we do. Obviously, probably a few like other smaller ones that are just in Atlantic Canada, but yeah, I would probably think that over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll probably see a constant increase. Not even just from the home side, but I think auto will too, because obviously auto, like cars were impacted from this storm as well, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not sure if that falls under like comprehensive, if they're going to be able to, decline coverage for that, or if that just ends up being the wordings under comp. But yeah, that's huge. Like the amount of money that's going to be paid out has to be, refilled back up in terms of that pool, right? So
exactly.
It's not even a matter of if, it's just when and how much and who specifically sees that, right? Which is typically how companies, as they get more sophisticated, they break down who's at lower risk of things, who's at higher risk of things, and they'll kind of increase accordingly. We already see that right now.
And coming from the client standpoint, just to play kind of devil's advocate a little bit, would you say that it is the duty of the insurance company to increase people's rates, even though that we've seen that insurance companies have taken like historical profit margins, even in COVID?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely gonna have to increase for sure.
Because again, like for me, like I understand, like if you have a loss, you can't obviously pay the same price after a loss than you did before. Like it
Yeah.
just doesn't make it. It just the stats aren't there that you can allow someone to do that, right? So like I think you have to be able to basically, I guess, like you said, kind of fill that pool back up for when things like this do possibly happen again.
Well, and they'll increase based on like what type of clientele they want moving forward as well, right? Every one of us is a different risk, and the appetites of the insurance companies always change, based on data, right?
Yeah.
What are they? What can they offset? Who's at greater risk for XYZ claim versus this type? Like all of that information is obviously provided, and then distributed to how they adjust claims and how they determine rate. But I mean, at the same time, there's a fine line as an equation goes between how much is too much of an increase. That are you going to lose X percentage of your business because the increase is not enough where someone's okay with swallowing that for another year, right?
Yeah.
Some people might be okay with 5 or 10%. Somebody might be okay with even 20. But there's also the same consumer that has a really, really good risk that's not okay with 4%. And you have to be okay with losing that client. That'll be the big point behind the scenes for them.
Yeah, the tough thing is that not only does this happen at this time with like inflation at all time high, so you're also battling with inflation. Then you get this massive claim on top of you, so now you're battling the inflation and this massive event that's happened on top of that too. So I think regardless, we've already seen that basically every company that we deal with anyways in Ontario has increased other than one, and we're not going to name that company, but there's basically been one company in all of Ontario so far that we've dealt with that has basically said, we're decreasing our rate this coming year, or at least this quarter or whatever. They're time that they do, because they can change rate multiple times a year. So at least this time they're basically saying they're decreasing. The decrease is very, very small, but a lot of people have to realize too, when they say an increase or a decrease, they say on average, because they can't say everyone's going to increase 2%. Well, no, on average, our clients are going to increase 2%. So you might increase 5%, the neighbor down the road might decrease 1%. So I think it's going to be tough in the world right now, because obviously Canada is dealing with a really bad inflation problem on top of a massive, massive catastrophic national disaster that we're going to have to also deal with in the industry. And like I said, or like you said earlier, you have to rebuild that pool of money for the next event that's going to happen. Because again, events like this, you can't stop from happening. It's just a matter of time from when they actually do happen.
Well, yeah, right now it's kind of like kick them when they're down sort of thing, right? But everyone's in general adapting to inflation right now and doing the best they can. Obviously, some better than others, but I mean, for anybody out there that's already getting hit by inflation, then all of a sudden this hurricane comes through, right, and wipes out probably the only good standing asset they have, which is their house. Oh my God, I can only your heart goes out to them.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough go, and like I said, we send our condolences out to everyone that are obviously going through this tough time, and like you said, having their whole life kind of basically impacted, not even just in Canada, but like in Florida and parts of the States and stuff that I know they deal with it on an annual basis. But again, for like us in Canada, we really don't. So I don't think our preparation is probably there for events like this to happen as much as it is in like the States, because it's a common element of their weather patterns. But yeah, going through that, I couldn't even imagine going through something like this, because it's just, even like the small storms we get in Ontario, and like you're out of power for like 12 hours, you're just like, what am I doing with my life? Like I can't do anything, right? But again, like there's been people, I believe since last Thursday or Friday, that still don't have power. So you're basically going on almost a whole week of not being able to have power, heat your home, your home might be destroyed, your car might be destroyed. Like you're basically lost your whole like personal items, that kind of stuff, right? So I fully put my heart out to people that are going through a tough time like this that again we've never experienced. So it's definitely tough.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just kind of see the trickle down effect, right, as we leave off with that too, about what we're going to see down the road. And I mean, you're probably going to end up seeing, I would assume, news articles and tons of information at some point online about whether those are declined or not, because I've already started seeing comments about how certain things will be declined regardless of how they determine the loss. And because every insurance company will have its own viewpoint, right? They're not all certainly just going to pay out every claim. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that, like we were saying, this is going to take years to figure out how that trickles down to every single client.
But yeah. What else, James?
I think that kind of wraps it up for this week. Kind of some stuff that we have moving forward into October. Next week we are going to be doing another episode, just the two of us. And then we actually are doing our first guest on the podcast on the 18th of October. He is David Holton of Holton Mortgages. So he's going to kind of come in and talk about probably, if not the biggest thing since Fiona, but how mortgage rates have drastically increased this year, and kind of how that relates with insurance. And so he'll kind of be the nice little insight on that. And then, moving forward for October, we kind of have a lot lined up moving into the final months of the year. And then, we have some big ideas and things moving forward for 2023. But we're really excited to have David on for the 18th. And hopefully, if anyone else is interested in coming on and kind of giving their opinions and insights on whatever industry they're a part of, we would always love to have them.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, inflation's been a hot topic for every Canadian. It's one of those things that's, doesn't affect one person. It affects everyone, some people more than others. So it'll be good to kind of, pick someone's brain that's right in that on the mortgage and housing side specifically.
Yeah, because I think like any of my clients that have had houses and stuff, they've really been like, it's been a hot topic when talking to them. I've seen a lot of clients already like change mortgages and stuff too, kind of lock things in because we don't know really what the future holds for us. So I think David will give a really nice kind of insight on that because, again, he deals with that on a day-to-day basis. And then we kind of can wrap it back into how that's going to impact insurance moving forward, because inflation, like you were just saying, inflation doesn't just impact one of us, it impacts everyone, but it also impacts every industry too. So because if their stuff's going to go up, you're probably going to see insurance also continue to go up as well, because we can't just be the only industry that kind of stays status quo moving forward if everything else is increasing in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, we're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to next week as well, and kind of just getting back into the groove of doing these podcasts for everyone. I know we took a time off, and not even just for work reasons, but we had some personal stuff going on as well. But we are back. We are ready to put these out weekly, as we were saying before. And we're just kind of looking forward to getting back into it and kind of giving our educational points. And if you guys ever have any questions or anything like that, don't be shy to reach out to either myself or Mike for guidance or questions or anything like that you guys might have outside. If we brought up a topic and you didn't think that we kind of answered your question, feel free to reach out. We are always kind of there to help not only our clients, but educate people that might not have that educational point that they could go to a broker or their agent and ask that question. So, just reach out. And no, we're looking forward to kind of getting back into the routine of things.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a good fall that way, and get back in a weekly episode so we can leave everyone like that and come back and give them some constant material.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it. And it's always nice to kind of sit down, chat with you, and, give our clients, and not even just our clients, but our listeners, some educational points that they might not have gotten prior, right? Because again, insurance is not the most exciting thing to talk about, but usually when you do bring up points, people are like, you know what? I never actually thought about that. I should probably ask either my broker, let me ask James or Mike to see like what I should be looking into for my own personal insurance needs, right?
Exactly. I echo that.
But we'll leave it off for that. So, like I said, we appreciate you guys coming back and watching every week. Like I said, next week we'll be doing another episode just with the two of us. And then moving forward to the 18th, we'll have David Holton on for his episode. And then, yeah, we'll just continue moving on from there, getting some new guests on. And yeah, just kind of keeping things very natural, very chill, and answering your guys' questions and kind of giving educational points as we can. So, but again, like I said, we appreciate you guys checking out the Broker Breakdown for episode 5, and we will see you guys next week.